Hello and welcome to another episode of Father and Joe. I'm Joe Rocky, here with Father Boniface Hicks. And Father, as we were discussing in our last episode, I have begun to have the catechism read to me. And at least the version that I have, I believe it's the American version of the catechism. It's kind of broken into sections where there's, religious basis, something from the Bible telling you this is applicable. This is the part we want to talk about. There's normally a saint about how he applied it or how she applied it. And then there's kind of how would you apply this to your life, kind of ask some questions and stuff and think about stuff. And a lot of the stuff that, at least in the beginning, that we have discussed, I've kind of already gone through. But another thought that wasn't directly in the catechism itself struck me. And this is when it was in the section when they were discussing about the heresies that people brought up about Christ. Either he wasn't fully human or he wasn't fully God and fully divine. And I was kind of getting to thinking of it, looking at it from being a devil's advocate or trying to see all sides. Like, how could you even come up with this thought that you would then, let alone make it a heresy that you're prescribing to thousands of people? And walking through that and seeing how the church teaches that Jesus is both fully human and fully divine, it made me start thinking about Jesus himself on a little bit of a deeper level. And the thought had come to me, and this is knowing that the heresy is wrong, that Jesus definitely chose to do things in what would be the equivalent of a hard mode setting. Like, he did not take any of the easy routes or easy ways that he could have done his public ministry. Even if you take the mindset he had no divinity in him whatsoever, he chose everything the hard way. He could have just stayed in his neighborhood and just talked to all of his friends. He could have chose for his apostles people who were already kind of outstanding citizens that people go, this guy knows religion. So like if this was modern day, choose a bunch of well-regarded bishops and priests to be your apostles. But instead, and this is the one who keeps coming to me, so correct me if I'm wrong, he chose Matthew, who is a tax collector, who basically the Romans said, you need to go and get $200. You can collect your own payment on top of that. And if anyone doesn't want to pay you, we'll send the army in to rough them up, which is extortion. I mean, if you put that in modern day terms, that's what the mafia did. That's extortion. You're either going to pay us protection money or we're going to break your store. And that's one of his well-known apostles. And that's who he started building his faith around. People who we don't want to hang out with them. Why would we want to be next to them? And this is the primary people God wants to give all of his knowledge to. Like, what's up with that? That there are so many easier routes that Jesus could have taken than he did. Before we even start looking at all of the miracles, just from the way he structured his being. And the thought came to me, and sorry, this is a long-winded way of getting there, is if Jesus chose to do everything the hard way, why are we as a human nature so prone to take the easy way out? So why are we prone to take we'll have someone else take care of it, I don't want to do it because it's harder? And that is a human element that's applicable to all of us. We all have somewhere in us that gnawing of, I'll just do that later. Procrastination's obviously one way it shows up, but I just wanted to discuss that because in some ways, by doing everything the hard way means that we have no excuses for not stepping up for what our responsibilities are. So I wanted to start with that concept and see if even if it was correct or not, but it was a thought that I had that originally stemmed from the catechesis and then jumped out of what it was trying to tell me at the time, but my mind just started going in circles, and I wanted to discuss it with you because you know stuff, to say it bluntly.
So the question is again?
The question is, if Jesus first off, to validate the thought that Jesus did choose things to do harder than he needed to. And then the question being, why is it so prevalent for people to take the easy way out?
Well, hard and easy is a little bit of something we have to be careful about. Um, One of the things about virtue, as we discussed, is that as you grow in virtue, the right thing becomes easier. So as we set out to grow in virtue, the right thing might be more difficult. You can always make the analogy with athletics. You know, it's very hard for me to run 5 miles. For somebody who runs marathons, running 5 miles is relaxation, and and that happens as we grow over time. And so it's actually Immanuel Kant had the idea that something is more valuable if it's harder, and that's a false idea. So it's not the hardness which makes it more valuable. It's the rightness which makes it more valuable. When our fallen nature is oriented against things that are right, then the right thing tends to be harder. But that's not the ultimate goal. And so even what Jesus did might seem hard to us, but might seem not so bad to him. He wasn't necessarily always doing the hardest thing. Now, ultimately, ascending the cross, I mean, the passion entered into all of our suffering, and redeemed us. So that was pretty hard. The cross actually, by its nature, embraces all hard things. It embraces all wounds. It embraces all suffering. It embraces everything that's uphill and rubs the wrong way. Because Jesus wanted to be with us in all of those most difficult moments of life, and so he enters into that. So it's kind of the summation of that. But again, it's not necessarily the case that harder makes it better. More right, more good is what makes things better, not harder. So um, but Jesus, his mission is bigger than we can imagine. I mean, his mission was to redeem everyone for all time. So it was to proclaim the Father's love to the ends of the earth, or at least initiate a process that would do that within the limits of his human nature, which he is God, but he also was fully human, and so he lived within the confines of human nature. But he didn't personally go to the ends of the earth. He abided by his limited human nature, and he lived in the place where he was um, born and raised in uh, Israel and Judah and Jerusalem and Nazareth. And then he took on this the hardest struggle that ever existed, because he was taking on the prince of this world. And so and he did that for the sake of our salvation for all of us. It's a universal invitation to transformation in Christ and salvation from evil, from sin. And um, so why do we take the easy way out? Well, we a basic mode that we follow is that pain is bad and pleasure is good. It's and we tend to avoid places of heavy psychological pain. In particular, our interior is arranged around avoiding psychic pain, and we try to find an easier path than one that would really be more painful, I guess. And so uh, I think we're oriented that way also because we're made for heaven. I mean, we're made. Uh, the basic emotional structure is that what is good feels good. So joy comes from the possession of the good. What is evil feels bad, sadness, and if we're moved to overcome it, anger, and flight, fear. Those all come from bad things, and so we're basically oriented away from bad things. Now, we get some distorted thinking that's caused by sin, which makes it seem that things that are bad are good. And that's the twisting that St. Paul talks about in Romans. I think it's in Romans where he talks about there people will be attracted to, will call evil good and good evil. And we do that when we, I don't know, make a meal out of dessert or something like that. Uh, evil is maybe a little bit strong of a word to use for that, but we when we try to take the easy way out, a lot of times it's a matter of choosing what seems to be good because it's easy in the short term, it's pleasurable in the short term, but in fact is bad. It has long-term negative consequences, and then we suffer. It turns out to be worse for us in the long term, and so what was easy at the outset is worse in the long term. And that would be one way to interpret Jesus' statement about, broad is the way that is easy and leads to death, and narrow is the way that leads to life. And but choose the narrow way. Um, Follow the path of good. Good is a narrow way because there is a kind of greatest good that we can choose at every moment, and there's one greatest good. There are many goods maybe, and but there's one greatest good, and that's the one we keep choosing. And so it can be a very narrow way that we follow, which is the way of Christ Himself.
And as you were talking about psychological pain there, I had another note from my thoughts rolling around the catechism there, along the same lines here of, we've discussed this in the past, and this is a new thought that I've had, trying to put myself in the situation of various points in the Bible and from perspectives. And when the moment happens that during the Passion, when Jesus is on front of trial, in front of the town, and this just might be the visualization I have from the way the Passion was filmed, the movie, but in my head, it's basically he's at the top of these steps with thousands and thousands of people below him. And on the one hand, we have Jesus here, and on the other hand, there's Barabbas. And made me think about, well, why did the Jews want Barabbas? Aside from he's not that guy, which I certainly understand, people will vote just because you're not that guy. I get that. But looking at Barabbas himself, he's a militant guy who was trying to get rid of the Romans for the nation of Israel, not the faith necessarily, but the nation. We're going to kill the oppressors that are taking our land. And you can see how that's a natural, like, yeah, let's go for that. That makes sense on a certain level. Someone took something that's mine, I would like it back, from a national standpoint. And from the perspective of Jesus, which is the faith, is that all of his teachings were essentially the opposite. When he says, turn your cheek so that your other can be struck, and that we shouldn't live eye for an eye. And essentially, in a very real way, Barabbas is representing, if not is, the political power versus diving into the faith. And him being in Jerusalem teaching for years now, and being in his public ministry for at least 3 years to this point, all of the miracles he's done, some of them might have even been at some of these miracles he's at. He might have even been feeding these people once or twice. And to see them all turn for what is completely missing the boat of everything he's teaching, before we even deal with all the physical pain of the Stations of the Cross that we discuss all the time, that to me seems to be about as big of a psychological pain blow that you can have. And to have that, I know there's not a lot of time where he dwells on it after the fact, obviously, but to think about that synopsis really seems devastating. And also, correct me if I'm wrong about any of the analogies I've done in my research about Barabbas or anything, because I'm not going to say all my sources might have been perfect. But from the way I read, that kind of seems to be the consensus of the guy. So with that being said, I don't know if that's totally on the mark or off bait, but that seems to be in terms of psychological pain. I don't think you can get much more than that.
Yeah. Yeah, there's certainly a lot of again where we talk about Jesus entering into all of our suffering, we mean that in the most general way, psychological, spiritual, physical. He really enters into all of our suffering, and you spelled out quite nicely how painful it would be to be rejected in that way, uh, left behind, chosen to die instead of Barabbas, who's chosen to remain. And you described very nicely the kind of political power that Barabbas represents compared to the heavenly kingdom that Jesus represents, the spiritual power, maybe you could say. So that's yeah, that's certainly a terrible weight for Jesus to bear after all that he did, then to be overlooked that way, rejected that way in favor of worldly power. But that's what we do all the time. We turn to that which is immediate and has some value for us, and we let go of the spiritual value. We choose the short term and we forsake the long term. And choosing immediate gratification instead of entering into a committed relationship of love is an example. Anytime that we're trying to take the shortcut and not really develop relationships, not really look to the long term, not initiate processes which may take a while but would also grow much more substantially. We were talking in the last episode about catechesis, and there's always a desire to kind of take the shortcut route in forming people in faith. What are the magic words? What are the 5 formulas? What are the things that I can say and just teach people, and then they'll be converted and Catholic and whatever, and then I can move on to the next person? Or how can I convert 1,000 people at a time? I don't have time for this one-on-one. I don't have time for accompaniment. And those are the ways that we try to choose the easy way out. We try to choose the political power. We choose worldliness instead of choosing God's way of doing things. God is always working at the slow game. God is working at personal transformation. God is spending time with us personally. God is waiting for us to understand before he teaches us the next thing. He's not flooding us with information and expecting us to get all of it. So all of that is a matter of slowing things down and teaching, forming, assisting, helping, evangelizing according to each individual's needs, and to really honor the uniqueness of each individual as we share the faith with them.
And as we think about how that is contrary to so much of what our society is built around, I certainly understand the just tell me what to do and I'll do it mentality. You give me these 6 steps, I'll just do it and we will be in a better situation. It's to a certain degree, that's how we literally build things. You start this, put your foundation down, put up your framing, and, so on and so forth, and it'll work. But when we talk about the difference here of looking through Christ, that's not how individuals work, because we can make 100 of the same houses all the way up and down the street, and that's totally okay. But people are not all exactly the same up and down the street. Each one of the people who live in those houses are going to be vastly different in a lot of ways. So how could there be, a mass production system of that, if you will? And just quickly thinking about any time in history anyone's tried to do a mass production of people idea, it's never worked out well. You can maybe make the argument that the way we educate people has been positive in world history in putting them all through the same general education class. But even with that, there's so much individualism within the process that it's not exactly an apples to apples analogy. So with that being said, Father, we discussed a lot here, and a lot of thoughts that had come to me just from beginning listening to the U.S. Catechism, and by no means am I done with it yet. It's 17 hours long, or 19 hours long rather, and I'm probably about 3 hours into it, and I'm having all of these extra thoughts that are spinning out of it. And part of this might be what you just said God doesn't do, in that he told me one step and I'm trying to jump to 3 steps ahead. Partially maybe because I'm impatient, or maybe it's the way that the book's designed, that we should think about things outside of its pages. But but that's kind of what has been coming to me, and I'm sure that as a result I'll have more conversations in the future about where I'm wrong and random thoughts that I've had about it. So with that being said, Father, I want to give you a chance. I know we got a minute or so left in today's episode about something that we can carry forward with us into the future week.
Great. Yeah. Well, I think continuing to soak things in. I like Pope Francis talks about how time is greater than space. He says initiating processes is more important than controlling spaces. And so, what's the process that's going to lead you, that's going to lead me closer to the Lord? What step can I take, or what process can I form? What plan can I develop that's going to get me a little bit closer? That's where we're looking at the long game rather than the short game. And I appreciate you listening to that 17-hour reading of the Catechism of the. I think you're saying the United States Catechism for Adults, which is a kind of particular national catechism that takes the Universal Catechism and pulls certain things out and expresses things in different ways and highlights some things that are American, like our American history and our American saints. But that's great investment. That's the long game, and then taking time to talk about it while you're taking it in, listening to it is just wonderful. So encourage all of our listeners to do that.
Perfect. And we thank everyone for listening, and we definitely thank everyone who has put in a 5-star review or have left a comment. Our search results come up much higher when you do that, and we thank you all who have. And if you haven't, please do so.